Okay, it is 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. Today is Monday, February the 21st, President's Day, and welcome to week number 3 of Introduction to Criminal Law. And my name, of course, is Richard Wright, and I will be here for the next hour talking about the topics for this week. Last week we talked about properties against crimes. Properties against crimes against property. And today we'll talk about crimes against persons. One of the things that you'll discover right away is that if you should be aware that crimes against persons is considered as a more serious offense because it generally works into injuring someone or possibly injuring someone. Okay, so here is the course. Let's go right to the calendar, and you can see from the month view where we are here, right here. Lecture tonight, initial post due tomorrow night, reply post due Saturday. Your live classroom lecture is due on Sunday the 27th. And then your quiz is due along with your written assignment as well. Okay, and then as you can see that next week we start into the month of, well, we finish out February, but that your course ends just a few weeks after that on the 18th. Okay, all written assignments are due on that day and will not be accepted unless you got a incomplete and you went through the proper steps. And if you read that on the syllabus, you'll know what I'm talking about. And then we go from there. No assignments other than that will be accepted on the 19th and after. Okay. So let's go back to content. Let's take a look at the post. So week 3 announcement. In this week, crimes against persons, as I said, and chapters 4, 5, 6. I provide you with the PowerPoints that correspond with that accordingly. And we're going to talk about crimes like homicide, battery, domestic violence, sexual assault crimes, and then key terms, and then some practice stuff that we get ready. Now, this week, you will also have a discussion assignment. What type of homicide is this? And again, that's due tomorrow night, the initial post, and reply post Saturday. And then, here we go, the written assignment, spousal rape, and then the quiz. This is basically, just for your own information, equivalent to the midterm exam, which is time. Remember, I talked about you had these practice exams in week 1 and 2, which you can use to help you get ready for this test, along with going over the PowerPoint. And that's due this Sunday. And you know what my motto, adversity is the springboard success, is all about. Okay. And there it is right there. Okay. So now let's get into the actual module, crimes against persons. So the discussion assignment, what type of homicide is this? So you're going to look at Rick and James, which is a play on words. If you know anything about that name, it's one person, a musician that I'm familiar with. I actually spent some time with him years ago, and he was quite a character. He liked to get high. He and his girlfriend, Tina Marie. In fact, one of his songs was all about marijuana. The title of that song was Mary Jane. The initial post. So as the investigating officer, what criminal charge would you recommend against James? First degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, or voluntary manslaughter? Explain which is most applicable to this case and why the others are not. And then you're going to examine another student's post for your reply post. Consider all three potential charges. Explain why you feel more strongly about the one of the crimes being successfully charged versus another. Okay. Then, of course, you have this guides. Remember, I told you to help you dealing with those issues there as well. Okay. So you want to make sure you get that done. And then the written assignment. Now, pay attention. This is a two-part exam. It must be in a Word document. I would highly recommend, notice it says this is a two-part. And in part one, you examine the type of crimes that are committed using this scenario. And a short paper addressing the questions about the scenario. Now, notice this, that the short paper in this case means a minimum of 2 pages, not counting the reference page, not counting the cover sheet. Be sure that you have citations in the body of your paper. If you do not have citations in the body of your paper, you will end up with somewhere in the range of 55, which is not a good thing. And it's very important. I keep stressing APA to you. It is not a minor thing. It's very important because of how much we talk about APA. And what we're trying to do is get you to give credit for the sources that you discover from your research. At the same time, we want you to include some critical thinking. But when we say give credit, it actually supports the statements that are in your paper. Where did you get the information? Proper APA formatted. They're not the same as references, okay? And your reference page should be separate and should contain all of your citations as well. List the elements of the offenses and explain how they have been met. Explain what type of crime or crimes have been committed. Explain why the initial responding officer mishandled the case. And cite your sources. APA citation. Try to minimize the use of your textbook. But the outside sources you can get from the library and learning center. But be sure, as it says, include a references page, APA citations in the body, and the proper format. Double spaced, people, not single space. Romans 12. Now, I would separate the two. I would put part 1 and then write the 2 pages. Notice what it says. the 2 pages does not include part 1 and part 2. It includes 2 pages for examining the type of crimes committed. Okay? So really it's 3 pages. In this part, conduct the type of interview questions that you would ask. If you found some questions, you need to give credit for those questions. And so you're using this scenario here. Okay? And you're interviewing her. A minimum of 1 page. So this is 2 pages. This is 1. I will be grading on content information. 2. Explain how you approach the interview with Jackie. What sensitive questions you would ask as well. Here is help with APA, guides to justice studies to help you with your written assignments, and it must be in a Word document. Did you hear me? Not a PDF or any other format. Now, let me show you something about the rubric so you understand something. If you do not have citations and references, citations particularly, you will end up losing points. So the question that I'm asking is, did you list the elements and explain how they've been met and the types of crimes committed and why? And did you meet the 2-page minimum requirement for part 1? Part 2, explain how the student approached the interview, a 1-page minimum. So you didn't notice the difference. Double space. And then your punctuation, spelling, and the rest. Okay, now that's going to be based on 25% of your grade. All right. So then your spelling, your punctuation, your sentence structure, appropriate academic form, grammar, no errors. And then the last part, APA. If you do not have citations, you are going to lose 10 points. So you're going to have 10 points for each section you will see in just a few minutes. Okay? No Wikipedia, credible sources, properly cited. Okay? So please do not mess up. Now, this is different from the other rubrics because I had to put this one together, and it makes it easier for you to follow. It's the same information. So if you don't meet the 2 pages, you're going to lose some points for it. You don't meet the 1 page, you're going to lose. If I find spelling and grammar issues, you're going to run into problems. Run your papers through Grammarly, by the way. And then if you don't have the APA information in there, you're going to lose 10 points. Of course, if you cite any of the Wikipedia, you're going to lose the points as well. So you'll see my comments in the grade book. All right. Very important. So here's how you can see that. Okay. Then after that, then you have the quiz, which is the midterm. It encompasses chapters 1, 2, and 3. I already cautioned you about where you could find some of the questions that will end up on there. Okay. Now, in your grade book, of course, quiz is automatically going to score based on time. Do not ask to take the second time. Do not ask to submit a written assignment the second time as well. But I'm going to show you. I don't think anybody has completed this. No, so I can't show you. But what I can show you is how it works with week 2. Let's see, I haven't graded everything. So once again, I will show you. Okay, here's one right here, the first one. So if you open your assignment up, but you'll see in the grade book, and here is the assignment here. You'll look at you'll see rubric. And if you click on the rubric, it tells you the same thing that I showed you earlier. So let's say you don't have all of these. So you're going to have points taken off up to 10 for this section. And a comment putting in will add feedback back. That's where your feedback will be. Same thing here for this section. Same thing here. Okay. This I'm showing you, this is week 2, by the way. This is not the actual week 3. So I'm showing you when I grade for this week, that's where you're going to see the feedback and then whether you created a flyer. All right. So I'm just showing you just basically where you will find the feedback. Okay. If you did well, I won't have any feedback in there. All right. So that's that. But that's where you find it, because students oftentimes say to me, oh, I didn't see any feedback. Okay. Very important. All right, so let's go back and let's take a look at back at the module again. Let's talk about the topic of homicide. So what is homicide? Homicide, very simply stated, is the killing of another. That's all. That's the straight up definition. It's the killing of another by a person. And it could be justifiable homicide, which is lawful, or unlawful, which falls into the categories that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, depending upon the circumstances. For example, when a police officer have to use deadly force to prevent great bodily harm or death to themselves or to others, it's lawful or justifiable. And that same thing might apply to an individual too as well when we're dealing with self-defense. In contrast, when an upset boyfriend intentionally kills his girlfriend because he believes she has cheated on him, the killing is unlawful and referred to as murder. All right. So the point of the matter is the key thing is intentional. You'll see that over and over. So murder is the unlawful killing by another. Unlawful. Now here we go. Generally, first-degree murder is the intent to kill with planning. So you demonstrate premeditation. Premeditation. That is, they gave forethought, which means they thought about it or planned it. And this is commonly described as we refer to as the premeditation or the intent, that they intend to kill that individual. That was their goal. Causing the death of a person, the person must die, and intent to kill. So cause a person to death with premeditation. Some says malice and aforethought. So that means just what I said, maliciously done. If it was later determined that the killer had told another of his intent to kill someone and carries it out, the statement will be used to determine intent. Remember that. But sometimes it's a little more obvious if the killer is screaming, "You're going to die," and then fires the gun. It's clear that it was intentional because the words followed by the action. Evidence of motive can also be demonstrated when someone sends a letter or email saying they, and that document is reflective of an effort to kill a person, such as an effort to collect insurance money, would be used to support the elements of first-degree murder. They intended to kill the person for profit. That's first-degree murder. Now, pay attention as we switch. Excuse me. Voluntary, intentional, premeditated. All right. Now, we get to second-degree murder, also called voluntary manslaughter. They're the same thing. It's just that how some statutes and jurisdictions label it. This is what we call the lesser offense. When premeditation does not exist, or you can't prove it. For example, the defendant in the state of Colorado, at the date and time charged, knowingly caused the death of another. We're going to go into how knowingly comes about in just a minute, so hold on. The elements of second-degree murder: there is no need for premeditation. Okay? No need to determine the mindset, but the intentional killing takes place. As I said, it's known as second-degree murder or voluntary, not involuntary, but voluntary manslaughter. Okay? No intent, but occurs in the heat of passion. So let's say a person kills a person under circumstances when they lose control. The heat of the passion applied to the case makes it murder when it happens immediately in the moment. It has to be contemporaneously. It would be difficult to lessen the severity of murder under this concept. So if Bob came home to find his wife in bed with Jim, but then hunted Jim down the next day and killed him. Okay? Now, that would change it, but it had to, it would be that it had to contemporaneously take place at the same time. Think about it. Voluntary manslaughter, as stated in Tennessee, kind of lays things out and sets it to final answer. The intentional or knowing killing with the heat of passion produced by adequate provocation. Okay? That's the key. Special circumstances is involving um, first, well, okay, let's go over it. These are what we call special circumstances cases. First degree homicide special circumstances. Here's what aggravates it. And many jurisdictions that have the death penalty fit this. In Virginia, 2 factors applying the death penalty in first degree murder cases. Future dangerousness, the probability that the defendant would commit acts of violence that would constitute continuing, so they're a threat to society. And secondly, the vileness, outrageous or wantonly vile, horrible, inhumane, involving torture, depravity of mind. So let's take the example of probably the killing of, I forgot her name, but the, the young man took his own life, but he killed his girlfriend first. Then he came home. It was all over the news. I can't remember their names, but you know what I'm talking about. And it was suspected that he killed the girl. But what happened is then he disappeared. He committed suicide. And the reason he committed suicide is because there was a likelihood that he would find himself guilty of first degree homicide under special circumstances. All right. And that the act was vile, horrible, inhumane. Okay. If neither of the factors are present, then first degree homicide cases, the defendant is sentenced to life and not death. So this is the special circumstances are going to help determine the sentence. All right. Now, second degree in special circumstances, in both cases, there is an intent to kill that person. The difference is that the second degree murder is knowingly and not premeditated. The difference between the element for second degree murder with less malicious intent depends on the circumstances. 2 common circumstances that make up the element of knowing, remember I said that knowingly is adequate provocation. Example is when Bob comes home and finds Jim in bed with Bob's wife. Enraged, Bob shoots and kills him. Bob would likely argue adequate provocation. Okay. In these instances, second degree murder may be the appropriate charge in some states. So that would be to keep from getting first degree murder. Secondly, coercion, death because the actor was forced. For example, if Jack is taken hostage and the hostage taker puts a gun to his head, tells Jack, shoot Bob, or I will kill you myself. Under such coercion or duress, he shoots Bob. So there's some affirmative defenses. Now, in some jurisdictions, state of Wisconsin, adequate provocation or coercion would be what we call affirmative defenses to first degree murders. Like I said, the adequate provocation and or the coercion. And when you say affirmative defense, you're saying, yes, I did it, but these are the circumstances that I did it under. The affirmative defense acknowledged that the crime was committed, but offer an excuse or reason why you had to do it. You either were so shocked at what you saw that you could then carried it out. The burden of proving that an affirmative defense rests with the defendant. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. In Florida, the references with a depraved mind is when the murder happens in the heat of passion then that would create a second-degree murder. So states vary according to that. Okay, so now you got, remember, you got first-degree murder with premeditation and intent, second-degree murder where the intentionally, but the mindset was different. Okay, heat of passion, special circumstances. And so now let's get to involuntary manslaughter. Involuntary manslaughter is when a person kills another, but there is no premeditation or malice that is evil, but reckless, known as involuntary manslaughter. Usually running across that, quite honestly, in unintentional situations, such as a person is intoxicated, high. That happens in drunk driving cases as well. There wasn't the intention to kill, but the actions were careless. So the question is the nature and extent of the recklessness that caused death. Now, in some jurisdictions, second-degree murder might be applicable. Okay, so get that clear. So let's make sure that you understand that the level of recklessness can be differentiated by the terms what we call utter disregard or indifference or a reckless act. Utter disregard for human life is defined, as it says here, as a course of action which shows actual or deliberate action or intent to harm someone. In contrast, recklessness means indifferent or careless to the welfare of other people. Let's say, for example, a person speeding in a car and kills someone. Then we'd get to the involuntary manslaughter. All right. Remember, proving utter disregard is more challenging because it's shown that the action caused the death that equated to what we call conscious disregard. Which degree of involuntary manslaughter? And let's take a look at this fact pattern. And this goes with what I was talking about a few minutes ago. It's 11 p.m. Streets are dry. 23-year-old male, Jim, remember he's intoxicated. Keep that in mind. That's an important factor. Is operating the vehicle on a residential road with 25 miles per hour. So his girlfriend is also high. So they both are high in the car. He's driving, she's the passenger. So he's going to impress her and increase the speed to 80 miles per hour. And he goes through a stop sign and collides with another vehicle occupied by a middle-aged couple who are killed instantly. Did Jim demonstrate utter disregard, or were his actions merely reckless? Utter disregard or utter indifference as a course of action which shows actual or deliberate intention to harm, or which, if not intentional, shows an utter indifference. So I think he would have utter indifference. Okay. Reckless is indifferent or careless welfare of others. So utter disregard for human life or his actions were merely reckless. I think that, quite honestly, is that you could have some say utter disregard, some say reckless. But then the question is this: thinking about what he did, he was high. Okay, if not intentional, utter disregard, or was it something done recklessly? So thinking about it, what would you classify his actions as being? I think I would say it was reckless. I think they were reckless because he was high. If he wasn't high and he did it, then we might consider um, utter disregard. Okay. Involuntary manslaughter can also occur in battery cases. And we'll talk about battery in just a few minutes. So you can take a look at that. All right. So now you got homicide. I've already covered entirely homicide. Let's look at battery. Now, first of all, battery is a misdemeanor generally. And the reason why it's a misdemeanor is because simple battery includes an intentional act. Remember, it must be intentional, and it injures another person without their consent. In some jurisdictions, it's referred to as assault. Don't get confused by that, because you'll hear the term assault and battery, but they are really two different crimes generally. Okay? And they can be aggravated when there's weapons involved. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Assault and battery are sometimes synonymous, but there are clear differences if you understand the context of it. So here we are right here. I raise my hand and place you in fear of being hit, hindered, or something like that. That's assaulting you. When I lay my hands on you, then I committed the battery, because it is an intentional act injuring another without consent. So the connection of touching creates the battery. So if you miss, it could be assault, because that person is placed in fear of a battery taking place. Look at what it says here. Reasonable belief in someone that harm may occur and no physical contact. Okay? No physical contact. But battery is when you are making physical contact. That's how I want you to remember it. All right? So I want you to think of it, assault and battery are used. Moving forward, battery will be used as a legal term. Okay, so we want to stick with not confusing people with assault and battery. All right. Intentionally causing bodily harm to another is simple battery. And pain or injury or any impairment of physical condition. Okay. Evidence of bodily harm is supported by what the victim reports, not whether the individual is experiencing pain. Okay. Serious bodily harm is defined as which involves unconsciousness or something along those lines. Mayhem is the most serious type of bodily injury where your body is dismembered, or you become disabled, tied up or something, disfigures. Let's say someone poured hot water, acid or something, cut you or something along those lines. Well, this could be, you can get aggravated with that, but we'll talk about that later. All right. So let's look at this scenario here to help you with mayhem. 18-year-old girl Angela at a party with a 21-year-old male. So they're both adults. Okay, Drake is his name. Both were drunk. And Angela and Drake participated in a crazy cult-like thing where Angela agreed and participated, Drake slit her wrist and drank her blood. Then, to clearly show their commitment to the band, Angela allowed Drake to chop off her pinky finger. So without her pinky finger, she eventually passed out, taken to a local hospital, where she told the emergency room doctors what happened. In turn, the doctors notified the police. Did Drake commit mayhem? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. So it's not depending on the consent. Battery occurs between complete strangers and even among those who love each other, okay? We're going to talk about domestic violence coming up in a minute. Like right now. So domestic violence is a crime that is very devastating to individuals. I know, because if you listen to my story, I talked about what happened with my parents. They were both killed in domestic violence situations. If you could see that little kid watching and seeing probably either her boyfriend or her husband strike her, then that kid will remember that. Trust me, I know. It happened years ago when my dad in 57, where he was stabbed fatally, and my mother, and from 57 to 62, she was often beaten by her boyfriend, and that's domestic violence. So how does it come about? Here's it very simply. If the battery occurs in a domestic relationship, in other words, the parties live together or have a child together, okay? And it's more serious than regular battery. And there are several definitions, but the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence defines domestic violence as the willful intimidation, so intimidating that person, physically assaulting them, which again gets back to the battery thing, battery, sexual assault, or other abusive behavior as a systematic form of power and control. And that's exactly the essence of it. It's power and control exercised over another. Most jurisdictions say that it has to occur between two adults, that is, at least 18 years old, who live together and have lived together or have a common child, a child in common. So would that apply to a child that is adopted by both of them? Yes. If the domestic relationship exists at the time of the offense, it becomes domestic because it happened within that relationship at that time. Remember, that's a key. It says, although the definition of domestic violence discussed above is broad, it's more specific from a criminal law perspective. When investigating a domestic violence, law enforcement must determine if the act occurred within the context of a domestic relationship. Remember, two adults who live together or have lived together or have a child in common. That's pretty much it. I'm not going to get into all the little things here. All right. You can learn about mandatory arrest laws in chapter 1, of introduction to the mandatory arrest for domestic violence in this ebook. Clicking on that. Usually what they do is they take one person out of the house and they have what they call a cooling off period, or for 72 hours. And so that's 3 days, a no contact. And during this period, it gives them the chance to gather themselves, calm down, whatever. Now, if it's aggravated battery or something like that, that's different. That is, used a weapon or something. My mother was beat with a bat. She was stabbed, and all of this. I'm not talking about counting the time when she died. Okay, it is so important that this statement that I'm about to make is that this punishment can be especially problematic for police officers who find themselves in domestic incidents. Unfortunately, domestic violence among police officers relationship is not uncommon. So it happens with individuals who are in law enforcement because of the fact that weapons are present. Okay? Since carrying a firearm is part of the job, and you can learn more about that sexual assault. I will tell you this, that we learned in the police academy in our training that domestic violence was one of the most dangerous calls that you would get as a police officer. You can recall recently there were 2 individuals who were killed responding to a domestic violence call. I remember, just to give you an example of one, when I was a police officer, we went to a house and the husband had beaten the woman pretty bad. The house was in disarray, stuff was broken and torn. And so we went in, and one of us was assigned to watch her. And as the other officers, I think it was 3 others, went to grab him, she jumped up and says, "Don't hurt my man, don't hurt my man." There have been times when officers would be attacked. And so I can remember on another occasion, we were at a house and we were responding to a domestic violence call, and the woman was sitting on the couch. And the police came and grabbed her husband and was placed him in handcuffs, and she started to reach her hand down into the couch, and I was the one who was assigned to watch her. And I said, "Get your hands out of there, don't move, get away from there right now, quickly." And I used my voice, and I had my weapon drawn, of course. Well, as it turned out, she was reaching for a weapon, because when we did put our hands down there, we discovered a gun that was there, and she was going to use that gun. Maybe she was going to use it on him, but more likely she was going to use it on the police, and the police are killed. So it's pretty serious, pretty serious. Okay. Sexual assault crimes. Okay, this is the last one that we will go over. And the sexual assault crimes. First of all, number one, you see that no? It means no. It doesn't mean I'm just talking. No means no. Okay? And it says that rape by unlawful intercourse by a male with a female other than his wife without consent. Today, rape is apparently referred to as sexual assault. And it doesn't require that the intercourse actually take place, but includes, first of all, the unlawful touching, however slight, of the genital area or the private part of that person's genital area, and without their consent, without consent. Remember, that's the key thing. If they say no, it's without consent. And they're very sensitive. And law enforcement plays a role in helping to connect individuals with sexual assault advocates who can help the person who is the victim cope with the impact of victimization. And so the crimes of sexual assault and statutory rape, we're going to talk about that. So remember, rape also is known as sexual assault. All right, now, when a officer responds, the time is of the essence because physical evidence, such as DNA, such as maybe semen or other forms of secretion, can disappear quickly, can rapidly dissipate. And in fact, knowing that the elements are and comparing them to the facts will determine the appropriate charge. Okay? There are degrees, first, second, third, or fourth degree. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the elements are pretty much laid out before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say the first part. So let's say, for example, in Minnesota, criminal sexual conduct in the first degree, a person who engages in sexual penetration with another who's under 13 is guilty of criminal sexual conduct in the first degree if any of the circumstances exist. We already said under 13, the person that was assaulted is in reasonable fear or a weapon involved there, okay? Or they're made to be helpless, okay? Second degree prohibits a person from engaging in sexual assault under the same as outlined in first degree, but the term sexual contact is an intentional touching or fondling of the victim's intimate parts, okay? Touching or fondling. Third degree forbids a person from engaging in sexual presentation with another if any of these circumstances is 13 years old and the defendant is more than 3 years older. 13 to 15, the victim, and the actor is more than 2 years older. All right, so we get into this. The defendant is a massage therapist and the assault occurs during the massage or a medical person armed with a dangerous weapon. Fourth degree prohibits a person from engaging in sexual contact under the circumstances outlined above in the third degree. Don't worry about all of these various degrees. Okay. Now, you should be familiar with the fact that rape is such a serious offense that there are laws to protect victims. For example, in cases because people did not want to come forth because they were made to feel like the victims, we have what we call rape shield laws, which means you cannot bring up as a defense attorney the sexual activity of those individuals as a possible defense, because that's why people didn't want to report rape oftentimes, because it flipped the script, so to speak. And that's this last paragraph, unwilling to come forth because of the fact that they would be treated like victims. So rape shield laws encourage individuals to come and testify. A defendant will not be able to introduce the fact that the person has a reputation of engaging in sexual activity with strangers. Statutory rape generally between juveniles under 18 and varies according to jurisdiction. And the key thing is that it is a strict liability law, which means that all the prosecution has to show is that the act took place and the person was a minor at the time. Minors cannot give consent, period. That's it. And so that's it. Crimes against persons. Let's look at the key terms. These are things that you should be aware of that we've gone over, and you want to learn these and have them so that you can be looking out for them on the test. Okay? There's the definitions. We've covered every one of these during this lecture today and explained them. So let's look at practice tests. This is a way you can practice to get ready for this week's teaching. I'm going to give you an example. Jane and Phil have been married for 10 years. They have 2 children together. Jane also has a drinking problem. Jane came home drunk and argued with Phil. Phil threatened to leave Jane and take the children if she didn't get help. So Jane was upset, shot Phil, and fled the house with the children. What circumstances would it be adequate provocation, future violence, or coercion? What do you think? Some people might argue coercion, some adequate provocation. So let's see if it's adequate provocation. That is right. Because she would claim that she did so because he was threatening to take her kids from her. Some might argue that it could be coercion. No, it wasn't, because he wasn't forcing her to do it. Mary and John have been married for 15 years. Mary discovers that John has been having an affair. They both argue and sleep in separate beds. In the middle of the night, still very upset, Mary stabs John once with a knife while he's asleep. John survives, and Mary tells police she couldn't control herself. What circumstances would she claim? Let's try coercion or necessity. That's wrong. Adequate provocation is what, again, would probably be applicable because she was so upset with John. So I did that purposely so you can understand the difference between the two. So we're not going to go over any more of them, but study them all. Homicide classifications. So here we go. Start the activity. Frank has a long-standing hatred for Kim. Frank purchased a handgun, hid behind the bushes. When Kim exited, he shot and killed her. Was provocation involved? Was premeditation involved? It's going to be that. Because he laid in wait, which means he was intentional and premeditated. John is a gang member who's involved in an ongoing battle for drug sales and turf. John tells other gang members that he's going to kill Jose. He tells them a rival, he's going to kill Jose, who's another rival. John leaves armed with a handgun and kills Jose. What classification? Remember, his words buried him. Okay. And then finally, the practice quiz. Again, as I've said before, some of these questions will actually be on the test and are on the test now. The intent to cause death with premeditation is considered what type of murder? How about this one? Yep, one more. A father comes home to find his daughter's 17-year-old boyfriend, who he doesn't approve, about to have consensual intercourse with his 17-year-old daughter. All right, they're both 17. Outraged and out of control, the father kills the boyfriend. The father is likely to claim what? Adequate provocation. So you look at these and use those to practice, and then complete the survey at the end of week 3. All right. So let's give you a key phrase. Homicide. Give me homicide and you'll get your points. Homicide. That's the phrase for the week. All right, I'm going to say good night to you. I will see you next week at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. Good night. Take care of yourself and stay safe.